So we're going to dive right in now. We have the second leg of Champions League action this week, and some pretty exciting stuff. Some controversial stuff as well. We're going to start with probably the most controversial of those games, and Real Madrid won 4-2 over Bayern in extra time, and the referee had a lot to play in this. Arturo Vidal got a second red card for this leg. It was very controversial. Two of Ronaldo's goals were offsides after we saw in the replay. And Casemiro probably should have got a red card before Arturo Vidal. So do you think that the referees handed Real Madrid the win in this one?
In a way, yeah. I mean, Bayern definitely had plenty of chances throughout the game that they probably could have killed off, but they didn't, obviously. And the way that things went, I mean, if you're a Real Madrid fan, that's great. You know, you're on top of the world right now, probably going to win the league, going into another semifinal in the Champions League. But if you're basically anybody else who would be rooting for Bayern, I would definitely feel robbed in this one. There's a lot of controversial things. Arturo Vidal's challenge that he gets sent off for wasn't even a foul, never mind a second yellow card. That was pretty ridiculous. And Ronaldo not being called offsides on one goal in particular, where he was very offsides, that was a little ridiculous. But
it ended up being the game-winning goal there.
Yeah.
So, you know, I agree with you. I don't think that as neutral fans as we are, I don't think we want to see Real Madrid in another semifinal, let alone being in another final. So we'll see how the draw plays out, where they land. But yeah, I think you have to feel bad for Bayern Munich here.
No, absolutely. I mean, they're definitely, I'd still say, top three best teams in the world. It's kind of a shame for them to have to go out in a final eight. I mean, that's what happens when you get paired up with a team against Real Madrid. It could have really gone either way. But that was just some really poor refereeing. And it stinks to see that in a game like, you know, a quarterfinal of a Champions League that's so important and so many people rely on some good refereeing to go on to, you know, be so poor that it's very disappointing.
I think across a lot of leagues this year, especially in the Premier League and Champions League, there's been a lot of really bad refereeing. And I know we want to keep the game as simple as possible, but it comes to a point when do we need certain video systems to come in?
Yeah.
And I think that's a very controversial topic, and I think we won't have that for a long time. But it's something to think about.
Yeah, and you know, in a way, I think the video replay kind of takes away from the natural beauty of the sport. But when it comes down to plays like that, that could be so important and so, you know, season deciding, it might be necessary, you know, because I'm okay with, you know, when people get literally inches off sides, you know, that's tough to call, you know, but when you're a couple yards, you're a yard or two off, something has to be done about that.
Absolutely. Moving on to the other Madrid team, and they were at Leicester. And there was a 1-1 draw there, but on aggregate, Atletico Madrid moves on. Good for Atletico, the third semifinal in 4 years. But I think the main story here is we just have to give a round of applause to Leicester City, because what a performance that they did in the Champions League, to go out there and grab a whole lot of wins, get a whole lot of goals, and to make it to a quarterfinal where probably no one expected to even get out of the group stage, is something that we've never seen before, I don't think, especially in recent times. And it's so good to see for Leicester City and their fans.
Yeah, everybody kind of had a feeling coming into the season that they were just going to flop. And in the Premier League, totally. You know, the first half of the season was absolutely terrible for them. Finding their way, you know, the joke was always, oh, they're going to win the league this year and they're going to get relegated next year. And that was actually became a real fear, believe it or not. But for some reason, they were just absolutely killing it in the Champions League. Of course, their group stage that they got matched up with wasn't the hardest of teams, but they still performed very well against, you know, some of the top teams in other countries, which was kind of unexpected given their domestic league form. But to not even make it past the group stage, but then to make it past the round of 16, you know, against a team like Sevilla, that was incredible, you know, to come back like that.
Absolutely. Now talking about Atletico, they've been there twice before. Is this their year? Do you think that they can? Do you think that they can get to the final stage with the the teams remaining?
This year in particular, I don't think they really match up quite as well as they have the past two. But when you're in the Final Four, usually you deserve to be in the Final Four. Anybody could win it. And Atletico is no different to the other three teams right now. When you have a striker like Griezmann, and of course a defense that's still rock solid as they've ever been, it's definitely possible. They have the young talent in Carrasco, and
He's been really good this
yeah,
season.
you have Saul, you have Koke, you have all these different players that could perform very well, and on their given day they could beat any team in Europe. So yeah, it'll be exciting to see what they could do.
I think that's a team that deserves a major trophy like
Yeah,
that. They're a team like Monaco who just built themselves from the bottom up. So a real turnaround for them in recent seasons, and they really deserve it. We'll see if that happens. The other teams remaining though they're really good. Couple surprises, but the one main surprise I think we have is this Monaco team. They beat Dortmund 3-1 at home, and they did it in style. They're really good. They was a 6-3 aggregate. They pounded Dortmund throughout this series, and their last several Champions League games, they've been scoring 3 goals every single game, and they've been doing that consistently in Ligue 1 as well. So they're this team. I think that they're a real contender. Do you think so too?
I would really sure like to hope so. That a team like this, such an exciting young team like Monaco, could just come in and show their worth like that. You have 18, 19, 20-year-olds playing like some of the best players on the planet. Dortmund is a young team also, but they're still no team to mess around with. And to come in and beat them 6-3 on aggregate at such a late stage in the Champions League, your final 8 best teams in Europe, and you go out and you still could score 6 goals in 2 games, when you're relying on a striker who's 18 years old, and some who say a washed up striker in Falcao who's performing fantastic also. That's great for them. Of course the team's probably not going to stick together very long once the summer comes around, but yeah, if they're ever going to have a chance to win the Champions League anytime soon, it's this season right now.
Let's just go through some of these players on the team, because I think at almost every position, these players could go to major title contenders. Players like Sidibe out on and in fullback. Players like Fabinho as a great holding midfielder. Brazil has a knack of just making really good holding
Yeah.
midfielders. On the wings, there's Lamar and Bernardo Silva. 2 players who look really, really good,
Yeah.
really young players who look really talented, and they look like they're gonna have bright futures. And then, of course, up top, Kylian Mbappe, who we've talked about before, but this kid just keeps getting better and better, and we'll see if he goes in the summer. He's going to be a hefty price tag, like we said before. But this team is really good, and if they're going to do it, they have to do it now.
Yeah. Kylian Mbappe is something else. Earlier in the season, he was touted as the next Thierry Henry, and by now, I don't think there's any denial to think why can't he be that, or maybe even greater. He's 18 years old and he's banging in goals. The composure he's shown against teams like Dortmund and bigger teams, scoring these goals. He's not just scoring tap-ins. I mean, of course he is, but some of the finishes that he's doing on the biggest stage like this in Europe right now, it's unbelievable. Some are saying he might go for as high as 100 million.
We're seeing a lot of price tags this summer.
Yeah.
Players like Griezmann and Lukaku and Mbappe all for above 100 million, which would all break the transfer record. So we'll see if it happens. It's going to be a summer of money, I have a feeling. So we shall see if that actually happens. But we're going to move on now to our final game. And what a performance by this Juventus defense. A 0-0 draw between Barcelona at home at the Camp Nou versus Juventus. And they ended up with that 3-0 aggregate for Juventus. Can anyone score on this team?
Oh, jeez. At the same time, as great as they did, I don't think this is the Barcelona team of years past. That being said, they still have players like Messi, Neymar, Suarez, Iniesta, Rakitic, all these great offensive players that they just completely shut down, not for just one game, but 2 games. Just completely shut them up. And, to do it for 1 game is making titles. To do it for 2 games is the story of legends, honestly. So it wouldn't surprise me at all if they went on and won it all.
I think this team is probably the best suited to do it, other than maybe Real Madrid. But if they shut down Neymar, Suarez, and Messi, I don't have any reason to think that they couldn't do it against Ronaldo, Benzema, and Bale. They do it on the defensive side, but they also do it on the offensive side. They didn't have to do it this game, but as we saw in the leg before, Dybala was a machine. And like we said before, Higuain didn't really get in this in the headlines, and he's a player that we've seen this season that can really tear it up.
Yeah.
So we'll see what happens.